Hey, welcome everybody. I'm here with Holly, and we're going to talk about agile enterprise integration and how it powers faster data-driven decisions.
Yeah, so first, a quick introduction. My name is Holly Coxon, and I'm a technical support team lead for the FME server product.
And my name's Don Murray, and I'm one of the co-founders of SAFE.
Great. So before we cross the starting line, let's take a moment to run through the attractions that we'll be passing along today's route. So the focus of this presentation is Agile Enterprise Integration. But what does that really mean? We'll start by breaking this down, and then we'll walk you through some of the benefits of enterprise integration and how this can be achieved with automation in FME server, but also some of the challenges. And for the second half of the demo, we'll be going through a demonstration of how you can set up Agile enterprise integration in FME server. So first, what is Agile enterprise integration? I thought the easiest way to outline this concept was actually to break it down word by word and take a look at the Oxford Dictionary definitions. So firstly, we have agile. And to be agile is to be able to think quickly and in an intelligent way. And then we have enterprise, which is simply another word for a company or a business. And lastly, we have to integrate. And this is the act of combining two or more things so that they work together. So as a collective and in our context, Agile enterprise integration, this means to connect disparate systems to help break down data silos and adapt quickly and autonomously to load changes, which enhances cross-team collaboration and also ensures decision makers have information in real time. So I'll now hand over to Don to introduce some of the benefits of enterprise integration.
Yeah, so some of the benefits of enterprise integration, why do people do it? Save your team time. By bringing different systems together, you're able to remove manual tasks, save them time, thereby also increasing productivity and efficiency of your organization. Again, minimizing errors is always a big thing because now people aren't entering things in multiple systems. And a side effect of enterprise integration is often you have to first standardize processes, which means streamlining them. Improving customer experience is another benefit of enterprise integration. We have this thing called FME Server Apps, which we'll talk about, that enables you to, and you want to make sure that your customers get the experience that they get, so they get the data when they need it. And of course, one of the things we're going to look at is how we can use agility to ensure that applications get the processing power they want to increase scalability and ultimately save people money. So achieving enterprise integration with FME Server, there's 4 different ways you can do that. The first one is using automations, and that's real-time events, connecting applications together so that when an action happens in one system, it's automatically updates other systems. You can also do things like when data arrives, process it on the fly, so S3 or FTP or many other systems. Data on demand, giving the decision makers the data when they need it. And that's what FME Server Apps is all about, so that they can have an app they go to, and whenever they need the decision, they can get it right away. One of the exciting things we added in the last release of FME was data stream, and this is high velocity data that might come from a sensor or an IoT devices. And then again, being able to process that data in real time enables you to know what's going on now and is really, really powerful for different types of decisions. Recurring tasks, of course, this is what FME Server has been doing for a great deal of time. And this is on a schedule, doing generating automatic reports or ETL or other data tasks. And so there you go. Yeah, so some of the challenges of automation, as you can see on the graph over there, often because we're connecting systems together and they're going to have different periods where they're busy or they're quiet, along with scheduled tasks, you need to be able to really handle these peaks. And as we connect more and more things from different systems and also users going to FME Server Apps, you're going to find that the load on your system can be highly variable and changing over tasks. And this is really what Agile enterprise integration is all about. How do we meet those varying demands on your system in the most efficient way possible?
Yeah, so automation is really a necessity to meet this growing demand and actually achieve enterprise integration. But because this workload can be inconsistent, the question is, how can your organization manage this unpredictability without costs skyrocketing and making the most of the assets that they already have access to as well? So, with FME Server, we offer a built in solution that allows businesses to scale their engine capacity efficiently, so to only pay for what is actually needed. And so we can set up agile integration within FME Server through three simple concepts. First, we have our queues. And this is central. This is a central component to job control in FME Server. So when FME Server installed, there's a single default queue. And queues run on a first in, first out rule. So what that means is that all jobs are submitted to this default queue, and they'll run in sequence, one by one. However, in FME Server, administrators actually have the ability to create additional queues that they can then route these jobs to. And these queues can be assigned different priority so that jobs can be run at a higher or lower priority than this default queue. So the second step to agile integration is then job routing. So after you've created a queue, you then need to set up a series of rules to send your jobs to the queue that you have defined. And jobs can be sent to queues based on a variety of different job properties. So this could be historical information based on previous job performance, such as how long the job takes on average to run. But it can also be based on other properties related to the job. For example, the repository that they're stored in, or the user that submitted these jobs to FME Server. And this can control how these jobs are being sent to those queues. So we have our queues and we have now sent jobs to those queues. But within FME Server, all jobs need to run on engines. So we also need to allocate engine resources to these new queues to be able to process the jobs that we've routed there. So you can assign any number of engines to a queue. And again, just like with job routing rules, there are a series of properties that you can use to allocate these engine resources. So this can be based on properties related to the engine itself. For example, the name of the engine host or the operating system, so whether that's a Windows or a Linux-based engine. But you can also monitor the queue properties and submit engines to or allocate engines to a queue based on the number of jobs that are currently waiting in that queue, or the number of engines that are already assigned to this queue. So there's a huge range of properties that you can use for this engine assignment that allows you to be agile within your integration workflows.
Great. Yeah. So the challenge with FME Server is you have a collection of services, and you want to ensure that each of those services gets the resources that they need to meet the performance requirements to best serve your organization. And the solution for all these services is the same, and Holly outlined it. The first thing is you got to create a queue and configure it. Then you set up these job control rules that assign jobs to the queue. And last but not least, then you assign your engine resources to the queue to make sure that the processing requirements are met to meet your business needs. And the result is you have this FME Server deployed in an agile fashion, which adapts to the varying load on your server to ensure that the jobs get done when they need to get done. And some of the use cases, you might have a server and then you have additional big processing jobs that come along. And using this, you can assign those to a separate queue, protecting your existing workflows from that, and then assign engines to that queue. Another one is you could have maybe you're in a government agency and you need to make sure you have standby capacity for could be in BC, it could be forest fires. And so whenever there's a disaster, or a natural, an anomaly, then we need to make sure that we have the processing requirements sitting by waiting to do that special processing. You might also partition your server by department. So you might have an engineering department and a planning department, and they have different workflows. And you want to make sure that one department doesn't totally, take all the resources and then thereby starving the other department. You have these FME server apps, and users are inherently impatient. And so when I go to a web application and I enter information, I expect my result to be very quickly. So you could have special resources for those. And so what this enables you to do is optimize your whole licensing and resources of FME server to ensure that everything gets done. So last but not least would be stream processing. For stream processing, you would have dedicated engines that would be there waiting for data from the stream to process. So yeah.
Okay, great. So for the remainder of this session, we'll be walking you through a demo on how you can actually set up these 3 steps within FME Server. So we'll break this demo out into the 3 parts, and we're going to be focusing on the second use case that Don outlined. So we want to have a standby capacity to allocate 2 queues based on an unpredictable load. And in this case, the load is going to be coming from an automation source type. So the source type is a new job routing rule property, which is supported in our 2022 release. And we do foresee 2 common use cases with this particular property. First, routing jobs submitted through a workspace app to a dedicated queue. And specifically, again, as Don mentioned, this is to guarantee that short wait time for the end user.
Right.
And then the second common use case that we foresee is through automations. And that is specifically when an automation has an automation writer within the workflow. This can launch any number of jobs, and so that load can be unpredictable. And we want to make sure that we are not wasting engine resources by having them available all of the time, but only allocate them when necessary. So I think let's dive into the first part of the demo. So we're going to hop over to FME Server, and we're first going to create our queue. So this is our FME Server interface, and it's just accessed by any web browser. And for this demo, I'm logged in as an administrator, which is a requirement to have access to our queue and job and engine rule pages within FME Server. So I'm going to hop over to my engine management, and you'll see here I have my 3 steps, and we're going to be starting out with queues. So on this FME server, I already have 2 queues available. I have the default queue, which is available as part of the FME server installation, but I also have a holding queue. And I've set this queue up because my engine is made up of a mix of both standard and dynamic engines. But dynamic engines, you'll learn a bit more about these later on, but they have a different pricing model based on CPU usage. And so I want to make sure that my dynamic engines are not part of my default queue, and I'm not making use of them unnecessarily. So I simply have this holding queue where they're being stored until they're required. So for now, I'm just going to create a new queue. I'm going to give it the name automations, just because that's the source type that I'm using for this demo. And I'll also give it a brief description. And I can't talk and type, so I'll do that in silence. Okay, so I'm going to select OK. And there we go. That is the first step done. We now have a queue for automations.
Nice. That was easy.
So that was easy. Yeah. So what's next? So now we have our queue. We actually need to create our job routing rule. And so this is the rule that's going to say, hey, if this job was submitted via an automation, then I want you to send it to this queue as opposed to the default queue. So we can go back into FME Server, and from the engine management page, we can hop over to our job routing rules. Again, we're going to create a new rule, and I'm going to give it the same name as I did my queue, just so that it's clear to me that all of these rules are connected. And so under the rule, I'm going to select the source type property. And from here, I have a simple drop down with all of the different source types, and I'm going to select automations. So within this rule, I could make it more complex. I could add additional rules so that as well as the source type, I'm monitoring one of our job statistics, or maybe I also care about our server apps. So this really can be as simple or as complex as you need it to be based on your own FME server requirements. But for today, we're leaving it with the source type set to automations. And the last thing I need to do before I save this rule is I need to select my automations queue. And voila, that is step 2 done. Easy as that.
Nice, yeah.
So before we dive into the third part of the demonstration, which is setting up our engine allocation to that queue, I'm going to hand it over to Don to introduce the concept of CPU usage pricing.
Yeah, Holly hinted at that she didn't want these engines to be assigned to the default queue. So she created a holding queue where she had all these dynamic engines parked until they were needed. And so the thing about dynamic engines is you only pay when they're being used. And so if you have a number of standard engines like Holly does, you're often going to want to use those first and then only use these CPU-based engines when they're needed. And so what this does is this really enables you to deploy in a much more cost-effective manner. Now you can introduce the scalability where Holly will assign those engines only when needed to do this particular work. So this can be on-premise in Windows you don't have to have a scalable architecture, but you can have these engines just waiting. So this is going to, reduce cost, increase your resource utilization, and ultimately give your customers for these automation much better customer experience. And this is what we mean by agility, the ability of FME Server to adapt to the workload it sees, and through these rules, assign the processing resources to where they need to go.
Great. Okay, so on to the third and final part of the demo.
This is the exciting part.
This is the exciting part. This is where it all comes together.
Yeah.
So for this part, we're actually going to create 2 different rules. So I'm going to head back over to FME Server. And before I actually create these rules, I'm just going to go over to the engines page to show you these 2 different types of engines that I have running. So from here, I can launch any number of dynamic engines. So on this FME Server instance, I have 2 standard engines running, and then I have 10 dynamic engines. And at the moment, you can see from this queues field that all of my dynamic engines are just assigned to that holding queue, and my standard engines are just assigned to that default queue. So at the moment, if I sent a job through an automation, it's going to go to my automations queue, but there's no engines assigned to that queue. And so those jobs are just going to sit there and never run. So this is really the key part to this setup. So I'll head back over to our engine assignment rules. And I'm going to start by creating a queue for my standard engines. So what I want to do is actually have my standard engines available for both the default queue and my automations queue. So I'm simply going to change the rule type from dynamic to standard, and then I'm going to assign both queues here. And so what will happen is the standard engines will essentially run the jobs first in, first out, based on both the default and the automations queue. So I then want to create a second engine assignment rule for my dynamic engines. For the second engine assignment rule that we need to make, this is for our dynamic engines, but we only want these to be assigned to the queue if the standard engines can't manage the load. So we actually want to monitor the automations queue and look for the number of jobs that are waiting. And if it goes above a threshold that we define, that's when we want those dynamic engines to be allocated to this automation queue to help take on that load. So we can go ahead and create a property to monitor this specific automation queue. And then we can add this rule. So in addition to the engines being dynamic, we want to look at this queue, and only if it's greater than, let's say, 10 jobs for this example, that's when we want to assign our dynamic engines. So we could stop there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep going.
Okay. 10's high. That's a big number.
10's kind of high.
You're going to work your standard engines pretty high.
Yeah, I'm going to work my standard engines because I don't want our dynamic engines to be swapping around too much. So
sense.
Only when that load is really high do I want to be pulling those in, because I am paying extra.
That's true.
To use those engines.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so overall I have 10 dynamic engines on my FME server.
Yeah.
But as well as my automations, I've got quite a few processes going on.
Okay.
I've got server apps,
yeah.
And so I don't want all of my dynamic engines to be allocated to this process. So I want to restrict the number of engines that can ever be assigned to this queue.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and create another property. Again, I'm going to be monitoring the queue. But this time, I'm going to be looking at the number of engines already assigned to that queue.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm going to say, okay, so I want the number of engines on the automations queue to be less than 8.
8, okay.
So that means that I'm going to allow a maximum of 6 additional engines on top of the 2 standard engines that I have permanently assigned. Yeah.
So that'll say 4 of your dynamic engines.
So I'll say 4 of my engines for use in other processes on my FME server. Okay. So now the last thing I need to do again is actually assign this rule to that automations queue.
Yeah.
And that's it. I have my queue, I have my job routing rule, and I have my engine assignment rules.
Nice.
So now I'm ready to trigger an automation. And let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so I have an automation that I prepared earlier that I'm going to use to test out our queue configuration. So this automation is based around racing.
Yeah.
And the idea is that I am going to enter through my manual trigger the name of a sponsor.
Okay.
And this workspace, my first workspace, is going to pull all of the races that belong to that sponsor.
Oh, okay.
And so this workspace contains an automation writer.
Yeah.
And so all of those races are going to be sent to the automation writer, and that's going to trigger an additional workspace that's then going to fetch information on all of the different cars that were run within that race.
Nice.
And then that information is going to be sent through my automation writer,
where
I'm lastly going to process that information before I log the final workflow.
Nice.
So overall, this process is just an example. So we've set it up to run around 1,000 jobs.
Okay.
Just under 1,000 jobs. So we're definitely going to be hitting above that minimum of 10 threshold.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and trigger this automation.
Okay.
And the first thing I need to do is just specify my sponsor.
Michelin.
So I'm going to go with Michelin there.
Nice.
The only sponsor I know because
that's how it works then.
I'm not particularly into car racing or auto racing.
Auto racing. Yeah,
auto
motorsports.
Racing,
we can just say motorsports. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so now what we can do is go over to our jobs queued page, and we'll start to see the number of jobs is piling up here. So it's already way above our threshold.
And it's going to the automations queue.
Of 10, and it's going over to our automations queue.
Wow.
So at this point, if we head back over to our engines page, we should now start to see, already there, our dynamic engines are being assigned to our automations queue, and they're already running jobs here as well.
And there's a few that are, and there's 4 that aren't assigned.
Yeah, there we go. So we have 6 dynamic engines assigned to our automation queue. And what will happen is this process is going to take a few minutes to run still
Yep.
because there is such a high load of jobs.
Yep.
But eventually, once the threshold goes back below, once the number of jobs queued goes below that threshold of 10, if we were to sit and wait on this page, we would see that all of these dynamic engines change and they only sit in the holding queue again. Yeah.
Wow.
There we go.
That's impressive.
Okay. So Don.
Okay.
Over to you.
So thanks, Holly. So what you just saw was that agile enterprise integration in demo. So it was great. So what she did is she created a queue for this special type of work. And then it was really easy for her to set up a routing job. In this case, she used automations, but she showed how you could use percent CPU time and historical job statistics to do that. And then last but not least, then it was up to the engine assignment rules that actually assigned the processing resources to that. So, and that's all there is to it. And really that pattern is the same pattern you use over and over again. So once you learn that pattern, it's really quite simple to allocate. Holly was smart. Whenever I've done this demo, I always just threw everything at it. But then you get into the whole challenge that okay, now you're not really giving anything priority. You're treating everything as the most important. So that was really great.
Yeah, and really the key takeaway is that this was just one use case. But as Don said, it's the same steps for anything. And so for you need to take a look at your organization and determine what is the thing that you want to treat as the highest priority and go from there.
Yeah. And so there you have it. FME Server 2022 delivers, this new agility to ensure you get not just the important tasks done, but get all your tasks done in the priority that they are to your organization. And Holly showed two key things that were new in 2022. The number of engines that could be assigned to a queue and the source type.
Yeah.
And that did not
that's
exist.
An important note that queues, engine assignment, job rules, they did exist in FME Server 2021, but these properties were more limited. And so that's what's grown in FME 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so in summary, agile capabilities of FME Server 2022 enable you to ensure that the high priority tasks get the resources, the low priority tasks are treated as such. You can partition your server. So Holly reserved 4 engines there for other uses. And then you can leverage, she showed also how she saved those CPU time-based pricing engines, dynamic engines, for only when the standard engine, she was sure her standard engines couldn't meet the load and the performance requirements that were necessary. So so way to go, Holly.
Okay, and so that about wraps up our presentation for today, but we do have some resources available for you online. Our team is working hard to create a tutorial series on a variety of different use cases for job routing rules and engine assignment rules. But we also have some resources on dynamic engines or CPU usage pricing available as well. And we would really encourage you to reach out to us via info@safe.com if you'd like to talk about anything related to your agile enterprise integration workflows. And keep your eyes out for FME 2022, which will be coming later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be in the spring. That's right. Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. And thanks, Holly. That was fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Okay. Bye.
Bye.